Hi, thank you for joining us here at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and consider other important aspects of working for yourself, being self-employed, running a small business. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Employers National Insurance Allowance, Employers Allowance also known as. Before I do, if I could please ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll easily be able to refer back to this information if you should need to, as well as being able to find other information that we have available on a whole host of different topics, all aimed at supporting you in your self-employment. So back then to Employers Allowance. So we're talking about the Employers Allowance for Employers National Insurance. So this applies to anybody who employs staff or employees. So if you are an employer, you will be aware that as well as deducting from the gross pay of your employees, their tax, pensions and employees' national insurance, you are also required to make a payment of employers' national insurance, which is based on a percentage of the pay that you're making to the employee. So along with the gross pay for the employee, this is another cost for your business, as well as employer's pension. So looking then specifically at the employer's national insurance, so the employer's allowance allows eligible employers to claim, and currently in this year, 23-24, it's set at £5,000 for the year. So what this means in effect is the first £5,000 of employers' national insurance you won't have to pay. So it's not a payment that you receive. You don't receive a payment for £5,000. You only receive the allowance against the cost, the employer's national insurance, as you incur it. So if you had, for example, in 1 month, employer's national insurance bill of over 5,000, then it would all be used up in 1 month. If, for example, your employer's national insurance liability was around about £1,000 a month, then it would take you 5 months. And what happens is each month you would say, this is how much my employer's national insurance liability was. It was, I started off with £5,000 allowance, and this month my liability was £1,000. So then I'm going into the next month with £4,000 allowance available. Now, if you are a very small employer and don't have an employer's national insurance bill as much as 5,000, then it will cover all of your employer's national insurance. If, say, for example, your total annual bill was £3,000, then you would receive £3,000, and that would be it. And this is the point of the allowance. It is to support small employers and obviously provide staggered support to those as they get bigger and their employer's national insurance gets higher. Then they would have to pay some of their national insurance, i.e. anything over 5,000. And there is, in any case, a sort of a limit. So if your employer's national insurance liability is more than £100,000 in a year, then you won't be eligible to claim the employer's allowance at all, and any of it. So if it's if your liability sort of teeters around that, some years it's under and some years it's over, it's counted on the previous year. So if in 1 year your liability is under 100,000, then the next year you'll be able to claim the allowance. If it's over, then the next year that you won't be eligible to claim. And you have to confirm eligibility at the start of each tax year to HMRC for that for that tax year. But certainly, of course, our audience, our information is aimed at very small businesses, sole traders, micro entity, small employers. So we would expect most of our employers in that respect, in terms of the liability limit of the 100,000, to fall well within that. And in fact, our audience, the small employers, are exactly who the employer's allowance is aimed at. Because, as I mentioned before, if your complete national insurance bill for employers' national insurance is under £5,000, then effectively you will get the benefit, and you won't have to pay any of it. If it's over 5,000, then you get £5,000 that you won't have to pay. And once that's all used up, then you will need to start paying for those months. Most people these days use some kind of software to process their payroll, even if it's HMRC free tools. All of those have the capacity to be able to keep track of your allowance, to make sure that you've claimed everything, but that you don't claim too much. So there are another couple of eligibility criteria to talk about and to make sure that you're aware of. So if you are a sole director of a micro entity, limited company, or any limited company for that matter, and you are the only employee, then you are not eligible for the employer's allowance. So if you are if you're, as an employer, only employ yourself as a director and you have no other employees, then you won't be eligible. You will have to pay all of the employer's national insurance. But that is just an eligibility criteria. So if you are a sole director and paying yourself through the payroll, and you employ staff that earn over the national insurance threshold, then you will be eligible. And if you are eligible, you are eligible then for the element on the employer's on the director's pay, if that makes sense. So it's not so the criteria in terms of the sole director is just that if they're the only employee, then you're not eligible. If there's other employees earning over the national insurance threshold, then the employer is eligible, and in that case they can claim the allowance against all employers' national insurance. So that does sometimes cause a little bit of confusion. So another thing that we've been asked about quite a lot is, because it's something that you're asked when, if you're using software, commercial software, you are asked about it at the start of the year when you have to confirm your eligibility, is what if de minimis state aid limits apply? What is this, and what should the answer be? So basically, de minimis state aid is effectively financial support from the government, and there are certain limits in certain industries that are the maximum that you are able to receive. So sometimes people aren't clear whether if they've received some financial support, does it count as de minimis state aid? If you are provided some sort of support and it does count as de minimis state aid, then you should receive notification of that to be knowing. And this did cause a lot of confusion, for example, during the COVID support that was available. But now we're past that. In general terms, a lot of the employers of the audience that we're targeting, or that our information is aimed at, would probably not receive any other de minimis state aid other than the employer's allowance. You will be asked if you do need to record the de minimis state aid, and if so, you will be asked to state which industry that you're in. And this is because the total state aid allowances, the maximum you're allowed to receive over a 3-year period, do differ depending on the industry. So we have agricultural products, fisheries and aquaculture, road freight transport, and then we have industrial / other. A lot of the softwares don't have the / other, so just know that if you can only see those for the industrial is the one that if you don't apply for any, if you don't if none of the others apply, then tick the industrial box. But if your de minimis state aid is only your employer's allowance, currently with the state aid limit over the 3 years and the level of the employer's allowance, you won't go over the limit, so you don't need to worry about that unless you have other financial support that counts as de minimis state aid. And as I say, if you get some other financial support from the government, you will have a letter that will say if it is de minimis state aid. So if you haven't had any financial support or you haven't had a letter that says that is de minimis state aid, then that's fine. Obviously, if you're not sure, then just go back to the person that you had the other support from. But just check what the limits are and the amount, because it could be that even if that was de minimis state aid with the employer's allowance, you still wouldn't go over the limit. So then you don't actually need to worry. So the time to worry is if you have financial support over the limit, and there are some moves to be changing that whole process since Brexit, but currently that is the thing. And the reason that people ask about it is because you're asked about de minimis state aid when you're asked to confirm if you're eligible for employers allowance. So if so you would tick I'll say you would tick the relevant industry. If you didn't fit into any of the criteria, you would tick industrial. If it doesn't have / other, it does actually, that category is industrial / anything that doesn't fall into anything else. But as I say, if you don't have any other sort of government financial support, currently with the limits and currently with the employer's allowance threshold, then you wouldn't go over that. So it's not something that you need to worry about. So obviously, if you are eligible, then do make sure that HMRC knows so that your claim can be applied. If you're not sure, or if you're thinking this is very confusing, then I would suggest that means that you should be engaging some help with your payroll. Even if it's just, sort of like an overall sort of general someone to ask specific questions for your business. And of course, if you are engaging any professional help, please do make sure that the person you're engaging is qualified for whatever you're engaging them for, that if appropriate, that they're a member of a professional body and that they do have professional indemnity insurance in place. So hopefully that helps you to understand the employer's allowance. So we're talking about employer's national insurance liability. It's a set £5,000. It covers up to £5,000 of your employer's national insurance. So if your liability is more than 5,000, then you will get 5,000. If it is under 5,000, then you won't have to in effect pay any employer's national insurance. You don't physically get the money, you just don't pay the liability. But it is important that HMRC are notified that you are eligible for the employer's allowance. Otherwise, they won't know and they will still expect the payment for the employer's national insurance. So sometimes it can be a case that you think that you've paid all your PAYE liability, you have a letter to say that you've got an underpayment, and you have a look and you realise that it's the employer's national insurance, and therefore you need to make sure that you notify HMRC, and that is done through an EPS submission to notify them that you are eligible, and then they will apply the up to 5,000 against your employer's national insurance liability each month. And so just remember that there is some eligibility criteria. Most of our audience wouldn't expect to have employers' national insurance liability in a year over 100,000, but if you do, then you won't be eligible the next year. If you're a sole director of a company and have no other employees over the paid over the national insurance threshold, then you won't be eligible. And de minimis state aid probably does apply if you don't fit into any of the categories. Industrial is actually the full name of that category, is industrial/other. If you don't have any other financial support, then you won't go over the state aid limit for the 3 years. So it's not something that you need to worry about unless you have anything else. So lots of information there. So hopefully that helps you to understand. Thank you very much for watching, and please do remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you find the information helpful, then please do also like the video, and this helps us to know which topics people find the most useful. And of course, any questions, then please feel free to leave comments. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.